Today, Aries and I are going to be making a French onion stew from the book No Meat Athlete by Matt Frazier and Stepfanie Romine. So stay tuned. This French onion stew can be used for your meatless Mondays if you're a carnivore, or you can put it in your vegetarian rotation. Dave and I do eat meat, but I try to have a meatless option once a week, and trying new recipes helps me build meals that I can serve to my vegetarian daughter-in-law, Emily. Okay, so what we need for our French onion stew is 3 cups of sliced onions, 10 ounces of mushrooms, 4 cups of mushroom broth. So if you buy it in a package like this, it equals 4 cups. 6 sprigs of thyme and 2 sprigs of rosemary leaves, stripped from the branches and then chopped fine. You'll need some pepper, 1/4 cup of red wine, tablespoon of arrowroot powder, 3 cups of cooked cannellini beans, a cup of water. And let me just say, I love when people who develop recipes put water as in the ingredient list. I cannot stand when I'm going through a recipe and all of a sudden it's like, add 1/2 cup of water to this, on the stove or whatever. And then I have to stop everything and go measure my water. Water is an ingredient. Just because it's water doesn't mean it shouldn't be on the ingredient list, because I put everything in its place. I do all the chopping, mise en place, every time I cook. And when they don't put water in it, it's a pet peeve of mine. So if you develop recipes, please, if there's water in it, put it on the list. Thanks. We're also going to be needing at the end, just like a traditional French onion soup, some bread, and instead of cheese, we're going to be making a cashew cream, which is kind of a vegetarian, vegan substitute for dairy. So even if you're lactose intolerant, you could make this cashew cream. It is really, really good. And there's also, in this book, it tells you different ways to doctor this cashew cream up so that you could use it for different things like sour cream, cream cheese, things like that. And we're going to just make it as a straight cashew cream and just use it and smear it on our bread and put it in the broiler. But I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So you're going to preheat your oven to 425. So in a Dutch oven, you are going to put your onions, your mushrooms, 1 cup of your mushroom stock. Oh, that was pretty good. Your thyme and rosemary. And the recipe calls for a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper. I love pepper, so I usually throw in a couple more grinds. So you're going to put this in the oven for an hour. And what this is going to do is it's going to caramelize the onion. So if you've ever caramelized onion before on the stovetop, it can take a long time. I don't think I've ever truly caramelized onion in less than an hour and 15 minutes or so. So if you read a recipe and it tells you that you're caramelizing your onion and it's only going to take you 10 minutes, they are lying. It takes a long time to truly caramelize onion, but they're avoiding that step of having to stand at the stove for a long time and keep an eye on it by throwing it in the oven for an hour. So that's what we're going to do now, and I'll be back. Okay, so we're going to make our cashew cream now while the oven's heating up and then I'm going to pop that in. Now, when your Dutch oven goes in, you're going to set your timer for 20 minutes, and you're going to take it out and scrape all the bits that might be on the sides. And then after 40 minutes, we're going to add the red wine. So you are going to be taking it, you can't just put it in the oven for an hour and forget about it. There are things you're going to have to do. So after the first 20 minutes, you're going to scrape everything. Second 20 minutes, you're going to scrape everything and add your red wine, and then you're going to have it go for another 20 minutes. We're going to go on and make the cashew cream now. And so for that, you're going to need a cup of raw cashews that have been sitting in hot water for an hour. You're trying to make it a little soft. So make sure that you have an hour before you need this. And you do if you're making this recipe, because you can have this soaking even if that is, even while that's cooking. But I had this soaking for an hour in hot water. You're also going to need a teaspoon of salt, and you're going to need a teaspoon of fresh lemon juice. What you're going to do is add all this to your blender. And you may need up to a cup of water. Now the recipe states that they usually end up using about half a cup of water, but you may, depending on whatever, need to add up to a cup of water. But you're only adding it 2 tablespoons at a time. You want this to be a creamy texture. You don't want it to be like super watery. So don't add it in all at once. Just take it over and just add it 2 tablespoons at a time. So I'm going to go over and do that, and because it's loud, I'll do that off camera. Then I'll bring it back to show you. Okay, so this is the cashew cream, and it's a, they say to make it a kind of a sour cream consistency. Now, I don't have the best blender in the world, so it's, I wouldn't call it chunky, but it's got bits of cashew still in it. I'm fine with that. When I eat something like, okay, so this is supposed to take the place of the mozzarella cheese that you would put on top of a piece of bread to put on the soup. But when I eat things that are for meatless or, you know, dairy-free or something like this, I want to taste it as it is, like it's cashew cream. So I want to taste it as if it's cashew cream. I'm not trying to replicate it being fake cheese or it being cheese. So I'm okay with that. But you may want to blend it up a bit more if you're trying to get kind of that cheesy consistency. Now I will say I like this a lot more. I've made things before, cheese substitute things that has called for that yeast. What is the name of that? The nutritional yeast, maybe? I'll look that up and let you know in the description if I'm wrong. I like this a lot better, actually. The nutritional yeast. I mean, it reminds me of Parmesan a little bit, but I think this is a much nicer substitute for cheese than that is. So, like I said, in the book, they give you how to make it into sour cream, cashew cream cheese, cashew milk. So yeah, anyway, all that to say, you're going to need half a cup of this to spread onto the bread that we're going to put on later. Okay, so it's been 20 minutes, so we are going to scrape down the sides of this Dutch oven. And you can see that the onions are starting to wilt, the mushrooms are starting to shrink up a little bit and get browner. All those nice, the smell from this is amazing, from just the onions, the mushrooms, and the herbs. I love herbs and I love mushrooms, and so it's making the kitchen smell really, really good. Okay, so that's good and stirred up. We're going to put that back in the oven for another 20 minutes. And then we'll be adding our 1/4 cup of wine and mixing it again. Okay, so it's been another 20 minutes. We're going to open up our stew. You can see that the mushroom broth has really reduced. Okay, the onions, everything's looking really good, and we're just going to add our 1/4 cup of red wine. Stir it around and pop that back in the oven for another 20 minutes. Okay, so this has been in the oven for a total of an hour, and now we're going to add all the other ingredients to it and put it on the stove top. Cook all that, bring it to a boil, and do that for about 5 minutes, and then it'll be done. And meanwhile, while that's going, I'm going to put the oven on to broil, and we're gonna make our cheesy bread, or our cashew bread, for the bowls for afterwards. So you can see that is totally cooked down now. We've got, and you can see the strands here. If you want to take these out, you can. These are the thyme, and they're cooked very well, so that flavor is in there. And as my son One of my sons likes to say he doesn't like branches in his food, so we'll pull those out. First thing we're going to add is the arrowroot powder, and then we're going to carefully stir that around. And arrowroot powder is a thickener, and vegans use it for thickening their foods. It can be a little, what's the word? Oh, there's another branch. It can be a little fussy, I guess, arrowroot powder. So if you want to learn more about that, you can look that up. If you don't have arrowroot powder though, and you're fine with flour, you can just use flour to thicken that up. Okay, so that's all in. We're going to add the beans, the dried mushrooms, the water, and the remaining 3 cups of mushroom stock. All right, now look at that. That obviously makes a hearty looking stew. So we're gonna put that over on medium-high heat, bring that to a boil, cook it for 5 minutes, and then I'll be back with the bread and the cashew cream to make the bread. Okay, we're ready to cut our bread now. And this is the whole wheat bread that I made earlier in the month, and you might want to check it out. It's a really good bread. It has a really nice crumb, really nice chew to it. So this is what I'm going to use for the stew. This is a second loaf of bread that I made. The recipe makes 2 loaves, and I made one in a loaf pan, and because I only have a loaf pan, I used a cake tin to make this one. That's why it's round. But anyway, we are going to use that instead of sourdough like the recipe says, because I had this on hand. So you're just going to cut your bread, and you're going to put the cashew cream right on the top of it. So we have our spreader here, and you're just going to spread that on the bread. So you can see that I have a little bit of nut in there still, chunky nut. Okay, there's one. This recipe makes, it says 4 servings, but it's actually, they'd be 4 very generous servings. So you could actually have this, just the soup and maybe a salad for dinner. And I'm actually going to cut that in half so that it actually fits in my bowl. And spread that. And then I have an air fryer that's the oveny type. It doesn't have the basket. It kind of opens up in the, so you might be able to see it over there. I have the Instant Pot, but it's a Vortex air fryer. So that has a broil function, and that's what I'm going to use to broil this and get this ready to go on top of the soup. Obviously, if you don't have one like that, you would just broil it in the regular oven on broil. Just for a few minutes, you're just looking for the cashew cream to dry out, stiffen a little bit maybe, and get golden brown. Okay, so we are done with our French onion stew. The bread has been toasted and the cheese, or the cashew cream, has turned golden brown. Now you can see that this is a really hearty looking stew, lots of mushrooms, and the beans as well is going to make this full of protein and also very filling. So we're going to be adding, I'm going to be adding, because I love mushroom, I'm going to be adding some truffle salt actually to season the top of this. And this actually has some cheese in it. I think it's Parmesan, but it's a truffle salt, and I just love this stuff. So I'm going to add that to my bowl, and I'm going to float a piece of the bread right on top there. And this is my lunch for the day. Took longer than usual than I do for my lunch, but I'm looking forward to eating it. That's really good. The dried mushrooms really give it a meaty kind of texture to it. And if you like truffle salt, I highly suggest you add the truffle salt to that. I hope you enjoyed this month of recipes. I had so much fun making them. Next week, I'm going to be talking about running motivation. It can be hard in the winter time, especially if you live somewhere like I do in Buffalo, to want to get up and get out that door when the weather is like 17 degrees, snowing, sleeting, whatever. And even if you live in an area that's nice all the time, it can still be hard to get out there for your training on a consistent basis. I get a lot of questions about running motivation and how to keep that up. So next week, I'll be doing a video on it. Videos come out every Wednesday morning, so hit subscribe so you don't miss this one. I'm a run coach from Buffalo, New York, and the 2022 season will be starting soon. So if you live in the Western New York area, Aries, and you've ever thought of having a professional coach, head over to my coaching page, which I'll link to down below. I love your running questions because they help me so much in developing the content here on the YouTube channel, and also gives me topics for the blog and the podcast, and see what I should be sharing with the clients that I coach. So please keep them coming. I answer all questions personally, in addition to using them as a jumping off board. Find links to all my outlets in the description and sign up for my once a month newsletter. You'll have all the content links for the previous month in one spot, along with all the running resources that I've been hitting up on the internet. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the run.